welcome to another new episode of the Quest for Excellence series brought to you by Integrace Consulting. As you would all be aware by now, the Quest for Excellence series is an endeavor which attempts to raise the standards of marketing excellence in our industry. Towards this, we feature interviews with business leaders, CEOs, managing directors, cluster heads, vice presidents, chief marketing officers, and business heads of various organizations in our industry who share their perspectives across various domains and what it has taken them to achieve the highest standards of excellence in their career. Some of the domains on which they have extensively achieved success has been in the areas of leadership excellence, marketing excellence, brand building excellence, commercial excellence, and strategy excellence. Today, we will feature an interview with one such business leader who has achieved outstanding success in the field of brand building and marketing excellence. Our guest for today is Mr. Anil Fernandes, who is the Chief Business Officer for Integrace Health, which is based in Mumbai. Anil Fernandes has over 27 years of rich industry experience, spanning roles of product management, marketing, commercial leadership, P&L roles, and now as the overall head of the business. Anil started his career in 1999 when he joined Sanofi Syntelabo, a startup organization which is known today as Sanofi, as a product manager for the cardiology franchise. He helped establish the cardiology research brands of Sanofi and did an outstanding job in establishing the cardiovascular franchise. Subsequently, he moved through various roles in organizations like Nicholas Piramal, where he also had a very instrumental key role in building the CV franchise of Piramal Healthcare. His longest stint was back at his former employer for almost a decade with Sanofi Aventis and later known as Sanofi. Anil was the Associate Marketing Director for the thrombosis franchise of Sanofi, which included outstanding products like Clexane, Thromboform, etc. Anil today is the Chief Business Officer for Integrace. He's also had an outstanding stint with Abbott Healthcare Limited, which again was the entity created through the acquisition of the Piramal legacy brands. Anil overlooks the entire sales and marketing function of Integrace Health, and in his role is responsible for driving the commercial performance and achievement of the corporate objectives for the company. He's a very strong, passionate believer of building brands through people. And his mantra is that business growth can happen only when people growth happens. I have known Anil and I've seen him as a passionate marketer for almost 2 decades now. And I can vouch that his deep understanding of the domain of pharmaceutical marketing is probably second to none. So it is a great pleasure to have Anil come on to our series and share his thoughts around certain interesting topics of brand building, life cycle management, and also the new era of digital marketing. Hi, Anil, and welcome to the Quest for Excellence series, which is being hosted by Integrace Consulting. It's really great to have you as one of our esteemed guests on this series. Thank you so much for having given your kind consent.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine.
And, I have known you, I've had the fortune of knowing you for over 2 decades now as one of the most committed and astute marketers that I've come across in the industry. And I choose these words very carefully because I know the amount of work that you have done around building brands and businesses, in the organizations that you have worked for, especially Sanofi and Abbott, which obviously I had association with you in different roles and capacities. So to hear, those golden nuggets of wisdom on your learnings on this journey of your career over the last 2 decades plus would be wonderful for our viewers and also listeners. The other thing, Anil, is that this interaction is being made available to all our viewers. That is our brand managers, marketing heads, business heads, even P&L heads, through both formats: the video format on the YouTube channel, which is dedicated for this series, as well as to the podcast series that we have just released this morning. So people can, can listen to the podcast on the go, or they could also sit down and have a look at the video. So thanks once again, Anil, and it's wonderful to have you. So I want to, quickly jump start into the conversation with you. And when I see your career and your track record, it's been absolutely amazing. You've spent so much of time in building brands and businesses. And one thing that clearly stands out is you have been a very strong cardiology business brand builder, and you are known in the industry as one of the really go-to men for cardiology business. Your deep understanding of the business, customers, domain has been exemplary. So my first quick question to you is, was this by choice, or it's just that it was serendipity at the end of the day? What would you say?
Yeah, first of all, Shailesh, thank you very much. And the feeling is mutually reciprocal, and always a great pleasure to be associated with you, because, in our stint together, even in our professional stint as a consultant, when you worked with us, there was so much that we could pick up from you. And we learned several things as a team. And I think one of the things that we learned is not to get enamored by the issues at hand, but to dig deep, get the insights out, and build cutting edge strategies, so has to make your brands win in the marketplace. And end of it, when you do all that and you reach your ambition, that gives the team a great deal of professional satisfaction in their careers. So I think we've had this good fortune of having that association with you and the value that you bring to this association.
Thank you. My pleasure, Anil. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so I think you raised a very good point, and when I look at my journey, you're right. Actually, I've been, you can say, typecast or slotted in cardiology for quite a long time. But the beauty is that, as I went through this journey, it was a journey of evolution. It all started when I got a foothold into marketing. So that was my very first baby steps that I took in marketing after working in the field as a medical rep. And then as things went on, I got involved in cardiology. The journey started changing, and I got totally immersed in it. And it completely consumed my interest in that area. And there were a lot of things that we went through. So I started getting up in terms of learning, building up on the curve in terms of maturity, getting into higher roles and later on senior responsible roles, and then transforming into a business leader. So I think this is what the landscape of cardiology has given me. And as I went through this, as you rightly said, in more than 18 years, I never realized that I've spent so much of time in one particular field. But I think the different learnings, the different situations, the evolution that I went to, it all added so much into the overall richness that it really made me what I am today. So, if I start from my journey in Sanofi, it was all about a startup, trying to establish the brands there and making the organization's presence felt, and along with the organization, the brands. And I think that was a bit of a turning point in my start in the journey of cardiology, because it gave me a lot of scope and a lot of bandwidth to dabble with the opinion leaders, to broaden my horizons, my knowledge areas, to get into one-on-one kind of value-based interface that helped me to get recognized, and then build more and more sustainable programs as we went through, to take my journey and build brands and build businesses along the way. So when I look at all this, I feel it's neither choice nor serendipity, but it's the interest that consumed me, and that really drove me to do more and more. And it was sheer coincidence, as you did mention, it was sheer coincidence that I happened to be in that area of cardiology. But yeah, different situations, different challenges, different horizons is what added to the richness of those 18 plus years.
No, that's very nice to hear, Anil. And what also strikes me when I look at your your journey is that you have had a very good experience. I would say fortunate to work not only as a startup MNC innovator company like Sanofi Synthélabo when it entered India for the first time in 90s. Then you worked for an Indian organization which was very strong in building brands through the legacy Piramal healthcare portfolio. Then you work for a solid multinational organization like Abbott, which had obviously acquired the Piramal brands, and now as well when you are the chief business officer which of Integrace Healthcare, which we will come, you are in a startup. In a very different environment, in a very different place where the challenges and the opportunities are unique. So when you look back, would you draw on those learnings of your startup days of 1990s and build out those learnings into your new roles and assignments? Have you able to do that? And what would those be? Just to set the conversation rolling. Yeah.
Yeah, Shailesh, sure, absolutely right. Sanofi was a great experience for me because it was a thrill of having the challenge to establish a startup, as you mentioned. Sanofi was known to the opinion leaders because it's a very good global house, but to a larger extent, it was still an unknown entity. And I think that fired us. We were at a very junior level in product management in those days, but yet everybody was consumed, with that fire in the belly to build an identity for the corporate and make Sanofi stand out.
Right.
So the very desire to create an identity, to create an entity, and to
Right.
make it stick in the marketplace was
Right.
something that really inspired us.
Right.
So I remembered in those days, we went down to the brass tracks.
Right.
So we all got that opportunity to really set the template of how the organization would operate and make its presence felt in the market. So
Right.
right from defining our universe by looking at what percentage of the universe do we have coverage. So based on that, how many people do we need in our teams? How many doctors you need to add? So what would be the brand matrix for each of these doctors? We got an opportunity to conceptualize that and set it up right from scratch and right from inception. And I think
Right.
that was a great thrill. So there was no set pattern of the past practice that we had to pick out, but we all had to back our instincts apart from the data to make sure, that we build on a cohesive plan that will give our guys, in the market, the first timers who are there, who are trying to reach to the doctors, it would give them some kind of an ammunition to build the relationships, to create that image and that perception in the minds of the doctors. And I
Right.
realized that the very first challenge that I had in that startup in Sanofi, I was looking, as you said, into the cardiology portfolio. And we had a brand which was quite well established in the space of cardiac arrhythmias. Corderon, it's a brand that is synonymous with arrhythmias and with the molecule. We had a market share of close to half, 50% of the market share. But then as we went on, we realized that there was scope to expand its usage beyond, the tried and tested ventricular arrhythmia space. There was a huge scope to take it into atrial fibrillation and also to take it from the cardiologist to physicians.
Right.
So these were the two opportunities that we saw in the brand in those fledgling days of Sanofi's operations. So
Brilliant.
I think as a small team, and the more you are smaller, the more agile you are. That's my take, and that's by learning after having worked in so many organizations.
Right.
We worked very cohesively with the opinion leaders, build advocacy, give confidence to the physicians, reassure them about the safety and how to optimize the patient safety by educating them consistently, and also developing, the area that we had to explore in atrial fibrillation space. And lo and behold, in a span of 2 years, our market share actually moved up from 50% to 85%. So
Wonderful.
we moved from leaders into dominance. So,
Dominance.
so that gave us a lot of thrill, to the young Sanofi team in those days. And I think the kind of work that we did, which was quite synchronized to the need of the brand and the need of the market, along with the passion of the people, I think that was a great fuel for us to build that pathway of success.
Brilliant, Anil. So, I think one of the messages that probably that if you are communicating to our audience is that when you work for startups, which are obviously well-established multinationals in their country, you have great advantages. So you're starting on a clean slate. So whatever processes and whatever you establish is going to be ground zero, right?
Correct.
And you build up from there on. So everything is going to be the foundation for success.
Correct.
You're setting up yourself for success. So you have, as you said, agility because you are fast. I think the speed of decision making is absolutely fast because you're a small cohesive team. You have everything to prove yourself, and that's why you get on to it and build great relations with customers. But I think what you brilliantly mentioned is the marketing aspects that you did was also phenomenal in expanding the usage of the molecule in a new indication, which I think is classic marketing strategy, which many of marketeers tend to forget at times because they try to do the depth game rather than actually the expansion game. And I think that was again something which you would. So this was was this a conscious choice to move from ventricular arrhythmia to atrial fibrillation? How did it? Is it because of data or is it because of interacting with the customers and getting to know? So insights were developed in that fashion?
Yeah, so you're right, Shailesh. This did not come through data in those days, but the opportunity was realized in our interaction with the customers and
All right.
particularly the cardiologists.
Right.
So we know that the indications was in both the areas, but then when we were trying to understand the milieu in which the product was used for the patients, right, by the customers, and what is the classical treatment algorithms and protocols, we realized that there's a huge opportunity in this space
Right.
because given the incidence of ventricular to atrial fibrillation, the opportunity size for atrial fibrillation was much larger. And particularly in developing countries like us, atrial fibrillation associated of rheumatic origin is something which is much more prevalent.
Much more
So,
prevalent.
yeah, so the usage was very restricted, mainly to the top-notch, very high-end level of cardiologists, and it
Right.
really didn't go down.
Got it.
So we had to unearth the needs as
Right.
to what were the barriers that were there that was limiting the usage of such a classical molecule when it is
Right.
well established in one particular disease area. Why is it being restricted in the other?
Right.
So we interacted with the customers. We tried to pick out the barriers, and then we realized that this is a certain set of characteristics that we have to really play with and address these barriers or address these needs so that we
Right.
are able to resonate with the comfort factor of the physicians and give them the comfort to do it. So
Absolutely.
it can never be done by your medical reps with due respect to the people on the ground, because when you're trying to shape perception, when you're trying to create concepts and
Right.
build markets, right, create categories, beyond the rep, you need the influence of advocacy. And I
Absolutely.
think, yeah, and I think it was a very good two axis that we did. The
Yes.
in-clinic communication by the rep beautifully complementing the efforts that we put on the ground with the opinion leaders and the advocacy we try to build around. And
Right.
slowly we made inroads, we gave comfort to the physicians. And the
Right.
rest, as you saw, the market share we became a dominant leader, from just
Absolutely.
market leaders.
Yeah, it's a classical marketing case study, Anil Corderon, because you not only expanded the indication usage, but you also drove diffusion of innovation to the down segment of from the cardiologist to the physicians, as you rightly said. And that's
Correct.
classical marketing. You want to expand the usage, you want to have new prescribers coming onto your molecule, right? So I think that was a beautiful example.
Correct. And here the learning, Shailesh, is that every marketer should know what are the barriers that limit the usage, and what are the drivers that drive preferences for these molecules.
Molecules.
So the marketer has to really understand, as I mentioned, the milieu in which the products get used in the clinical setting. I think
Right.
once you really pick up these nuances, you can identify opportunities and then work towards exploiting these opportunities to further your brand objectives.
Absolutely. No, this is wonderful, Anil. So, Anil, from Sanofi, you moved into an Indian organization, right? Like Nicholas Piramal. I mean, obviously, powerful brands, legacy brands like Gluformin and, like the other brands which were used not only for diabetes, but also for cardiovascular, the old Boehringer brands like ISO,
Correct.
I remember,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah.
So, I would love to know from you, how was it as an experience for you? Because obviously, for a marketeer to move from an MNC setup to an Indian organization, so there has to be a huge shift in terms of thinking, mindset, culture. There would also have been differences in the brand planning, brand building processes of both organizations. So could you kindly touch upon that? How was your experience? with Piramal as well.
Yeah, so Shailesh, you're absolutely right. And one of my motivators to switch from a hardcore MNC guy to an Indian company was because at that point in time, I got an opportunity to progress in my career from a GPM to a marketing head. And I think that was the stimulus that taught me, okay, come on, yeah, let's give it a try. I know it's an Indian company. I spent all my years in MNCs, but no harm in trying. It's a different opportunity. It's a different environment. And by the time I reached Nicholas, I had already developed some very good relationships with the top-notch key opinion leaders. And one of the things which in Piramal we had to do better was to really drive traction with the key opinion leaders. So I think that was where we found a sweet spot, between the journey that I went through and through my experience, the relationships that I could build with the opinion leaders and the need of the organization at that point in time when I joined them as a marketing head. So we changed the way in which, the promotion and the marketing programs were set. There was we turned it on its head. So the scientific aspect of it was taken up with a much more stronger thrust. We created platforms, where the key opinion leaders could come together. We brought international experts in the area of interventional cardiology. And these experts, they worked with our local opinion leaders, and we did live case workshops, tutoring the younger set of cardiologists. So through this, we could cater out and reach out to the younger group of doctors who were going to be the opinion leaders in the next 5 years or next 10 years. So
Right.
these kind of programs really helped us to not only connect Piramal as an organization with the top-notch key opinion leaders, but also at the same time build our relationships and our presence with the young group of doctors. So I was in the space of critical cardiology, and at that point in time, one of the very marquee events that we created in our portfolio was the event around Operation Golden Hour. I'm sure all our viewers would understand the concept of golden hour. When a patient comes with a heart attack, you've got to reach a center within the first hour, and you need to, give some kind of a treatment and do some kind of an intervention within the first hour, and then you have a better chance of prognosis. So we created entire programs around emergency cardiovascular care, and we ran these programs not only in the nursing homes, which are the smaller hospitals, but also in the larger hospitals like the chain of corporate hospitals. So that helped increase our visibility and our presence across a group of hospitals, across a group of doctors with their teams, and reaching out to the opinion leaders and reaching out, to the younger set of doctors gave us that blend in which Piramal could actually cut through, with a group of doctors. So here again, when I joined Piramal, we had a very good brand, which was competing with the MNCs because the enoxaparin of this world was not patented in those days, and there was a generic flood which had come into the market in those days in 2002, 2003, and I was there in 2004, and at the end of my journey in Piramal, I'm very happy to share with you, Shailesh, and all our viewers, that we exactly doubled the turnover from where it was when I joined to where it was when I left. But I think what gave me a lot of satisfaction is helping the organization and our entire team, giving them that encouragement that we could make our presence as an Indian company by just changing our marketing practices and elevating the status of the organization like an MNC in the minds of both the opinion leaders as well as with the younger group of doctors. So
Right.
that was something that gave me a little bit of satisfaction in those days during my stint at Piramal.
Right. I think, Anil, the point that you mentioned in the end is extremely important. That is the kind of marketing practices that you choose consciously to deploy, as even if you're an Indian organization, helps you to raise your profile and visibility in the key opinion leaders as second to none, even to a multinational. Because very often marketeers from Indian organizations are saddled with the belief that we are, after all, only a generic company and the innovator enjoys this. It's not entirely true, right? I mean, what you are telling us is that if you choose consciously to you have the best marketing practices like doing the KOL advocacy story or building those golden hour kind of programs, solid science driven programs, even in an organization like the legacy pyramid, you can make a difference to your brands and businesses because ultimately the customer sees you differently. Would you agree on that? Would you?
Absolutely, absolutely, Shailesh. whatever the customer thinks about you as a direct function of what you do. And the more you find the sweet spot between your capability and between the need of the customer, and you're
Right.
able to satisfy it better than what your competition is doing, you have found a good, place in their minds. And it
Absolutely.
really sticks. It really sticks.
It
So,
really is.
so you can actually change the narrative from CRM to CVM, which is customer value management. And when you do
Absolutely.
that, you build a much more sustainable, long-lasting equity and business for the organization.
This is brilliant, Anil. I think this the one key golden nugget that you mentioned, changing the face from CRM to CVM, because that is what it is, creating value for brands, and then you change the narrative. No, it's so beautifully said. Thank you, Anil. That's, I think, a very strong message that you put out for us viewers. Now we come to a journey which is probably the most exciting phase of your career, a decade long with, Aventis, Sanofi Aventis, right? So the world is a small place. So you went around, you came back, and you came back in a much larger organization where Sanofi Synthélabo had a kind of got merged into Aventis, and obviously it was a new organization, new culture, new template, and the whole story of driving the growth of the combined organization was the mandate. I remember when we were together, 2004 when it happened, and 2005 it got completed. So tell us something about that beautiful decade of yours in Sanofi, where you built brands, you again handled the cardiovascular franchise, you handled Clexane, you handled a lot of other products, Cordarone, etc. Did you see any differences in the brand planning or brand building of the legacy Sanofi Synthélabo versus the new Sanofi Aventis? How did you go about driving this mandate? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, Shailesh. I think it was as distinctive as cheese from chalk. So,
Okay.
there we were in a very small setup in Sanofi with 150 people on the ground, uh, a business turnover of around 60 crores. So we really didn't have the scale. We were limited in our reach. We were limited in our penetration. We were limited in our coverage. And everything around was subscale. And perhaps it needed this acquisition, to increase your scale, to increase your therapeutic participation, and to really set yourself up as a big giant in the industry. So that was what the merger with Aventis really gave Sanofi the muscle power to widen its reach, its penetration, and its share of voice. And we saw the impact of all this, once the new entity took shape. I think one of the biggest brands in my experience in the organization that benefited most from this was Plavix. So, so there was Plavix, in Sanofi Synthélabo, 120 rupees research brand competing with the generics, which are at less than 10 rupees, single digit. And you can understand, right? So there was not much of a thrust or a focus on it. At best, we were just milking this brand, giving it that just single exposure to a very limited set of doctors. But once we merged with Aventis, suddenly the game changed from 130 people to more than 250, just doubled. So it had a huge impact on the share of voice. And plus, there was the leverage of a world-class brand, Clexane, which every cardiologist, had a very, very strong opinion about its usage and its benefit. And the patient segment for Plavix and Clexane was the same. It was the same patient who gets both. So
Yes.
Clexane is more in the acute phase, and
Yes.
Plavix gets more long-term or in the chronic phase.
Right.
So, this reach, this share of voice, the penetration, it really helped us to build this brand in the span of 2 years. It became a 10 crore brand. From 3 crores in 2 years, it became 10 crores. So Plavix is the most stark example of what this change dynamics and what this enhancement of scale could really do to a brand in terms of share of voice.
Right.
And similarly, there was a lot of impact that I could see in the way we were planning the brand strategies and our entire approach to brand plan. Sanofi was a very small setup in those days. We didn't have many functions. And therefore, what I saw in Sanofi when I entered the larger Sanofi Aventis is the entire emphasis on brand teams collaborating and working together. So here it was not just the marketing team or the medical team or the training team, which was there in my erstwhile Sanofi days. But beyond this, there was a commercial excellence team, there was a supply chain team. So there were multiple functions that got together as an extended brand team. And here you could see, the inputs that each person brings to the table. The person from business excellence will look at it from a different perspective. The person from business excellence will raise questions on what is the kind of response that you're getting from different kinds of prescribers or even non-prescribers. Putting X amount of resource, what kind of an impact that you generate for each resource that you put on the table in terms of the outcome for your brands, in terms of revenues, in terms of market share, or in terms of profitability. So having a much larger team getting together and working on multiple dimensions of the brand, not just on the customer, not just on the market, not just on the competition, but basically even on the financials, maybe looking at ways in which you can operate on your gross contributions and improve your profitability, looking at the supply chain models, where you can impact the overall cost of your supply chain operations and therefore contribute to improvement in GCs. So all these things give us a very different type of a dimension into looking at every aspect of the brand. So here we were with the larger brand team meeting together, and this was a very regular feature, I think, in the head office. And then when we had a campaign planning, during the campaign plannings, apart from the brand team, which was there with multiple functions, we also got together very smartly our regional managers, our first line managers, and some of the star reps who were doing very well on these brands. So we could get a straight customer interface, a market connect, a market insight from all these. And I think the sheer confluence, of different talents across different functions coming together and putting their thoughts on the table, it helped us at least in the first step to distill out your core issues on the brand. So it was a multi-step process. So the first step is, all these people together from different functions will distill out on the core issues. So that's the first step. Then, of course, we would analyze the data with the help of the commercial excellence team. As I said, what amount of revenues will give what kind of an impact, where you need to invest, where you need to put your resource. And once, the issues were distilled, the next thing was going into defining where you will play and what is your different leverage points. So this entire brand team together would be looking at different aspects of where to play or how to win. And one of the classical things that the marketing team and the extended brand team would really look at was the patient journey and patient funnel. And I know, Shailesh, you are so good in that area because you also worked very closely with us, as a consultant when we were together in Abbott. But yeah, that patient funnel is a key starting point, in determining the leverage point and where you're going to play. Are you going to work on detection? Yeah, detection is a very, very key area, an important area in the chronic space. Or do you want to play on class share, or do you want to play on brand choice? So that is where marketers need to make that decision. And then there were certain criteria on which we can choose the leverage point in which you want to play, in terms of the size of the opportunity, the competitive intensity, the cost of acquisition. So once we looked at all this, then we finalized our leverage points, and then we came to our levers. What would be the growth levers to drive these leverage points, and what are the different operational initiatives? So this was a very systematic step-by-step process that we built into marketing and brand planning. Almost every aspect was considered to make the strategy very, very cohesive and to ensure that you're there in the market with certain value proposition to the customer, to have a preference to choosing you as a knowledge partner of choice as compared to any other choices that they have in the marketplace. So these are the things that we went through, and the change that I saw from a very small setup in Sanofi to a much larger setup in Sanofi Aventis, and then later the same thing in Abbott as well.
Right. No, brilliantly put, Anil. I mean, I was listening with rapt attention. So many touch points of the marketing processes that you have actually elucidated, right, in the past few minutes is one is the scale simply went from X to maybe 6 or 10X times simply because of the merger. Now, when that happens, it gave you scale, it gave you reach, it gave you coverage, and it gave you also access to marketing resources, which could probably have been constrained in a setup, but not anymore. Second, you said is very clearly it gave you the dominance in terms of share of voice, doubling of the salespeople on the manpower on the ground, which led to obviously impact in terms of greater coverage and greater messaging and greater reach on customers. The third important takeaway, I think, was that from a single brand focused entity, brand manager, you then get into a concept of brand teams where everyone, all stakeholders important for the brand planning process are involved. So you had the commercial excellence team, you had the sales team, you had the medical team, everybody, wanting to win. And that was the whole objective, right? So telling you what is the best business model to go to market strategy, etc., which was probably the need of the hour when you play out on such a large scale. And fourth, obviously, what you mentioned was defining those marketing processes, giving down the due deliverables to the salespeople, to the marketing folks, building the customer connects. I think these are some of the learnings which all brand managers need to internalize, adopt, and work through in their roles, right? Because this is what the function of marketing is all about, and not just doing the tactical stuff of just developing the collaterals and the creative stuff, which is only, I believe, 10%. And the pieces that you mentioned are the critical 90% strategic stuff that most all should be focused on. Correct? I hope.
Right. Absolutely, Shailesh. Absolutely. Yeah.
Very nice. Anil, when you look back at the Sanofi Aventis tenure of 10 years, and you were at your phase when you were a marketing director, you headed a franchise, great responsibility. Apart from the process, what were your key fundamental professional learnings?
Yeah. So, yeah. I think it's a good question you asked, Shailesh, because your experiences teach you a lot of learnings. And I think if I were to distill down the fundamental learnings that I had, the number one learning that I had is that never get overawed by your challenges, but can you find an opportunity within your challenge? Let me give you an example. In 2013, NLEM hit us. And, we talked about this brand Plavix, which became a 20 crore brand from a 3 crore brand. It was the year 2013. And suddenly there was a huge drop in price because of the NLEM policy of our Indian government. And the price came down by 90%. So you can imagine overnight, the brand loses its revenue from a 20 crore brand to a 2 crore brand. Now, this was a great challenge for us, but luckily we were anticipating it, and we knew that it's a matter of time before it comes into the ambit of price control to the NLEM policies. So we didn't look at the problem. We said, come on, what's the challenge? What's the opportunity? Now, when we look at our core prescribers, for the 20 crore brand at 120 rupees, you won't believe we had only 200 doctors who were prescribing Plavix. And the universe of intervention cardiologists is around 6,000. So we thought to ourselves, the remaining 5,500 cardiologists are not using it, or they are restricting the usage because of affordability, and rightly so, because the cost of the angioplasty alone ranges from 3 lakhs to even 7, 8 lakhs. So they will limit the use of such costly products in the interest of the patient. But now you have the brand that has come down to the level of 12 rupees a tablet. And here it is much more affordable. So we went down to the bottom of the pyramid in a very step-by-step fashion. So we looked at the opportunity that is there. The first opportunity was, of course, the intervention cardiologists, the remaining 5,500 who were not our prescribers. So that was the big opportunity where we focused on. So we made that as a choice. Then behind that, there was, or below that, there was this entire population of physicians. So we thought to ourselves, we'll not go into the area of physicians, medical management. So see, when you're talking about your strategy, you distill down your choices, and you have to be very clear of where you will play and where you will not play. And we made a very important choice. It was very easy for us to say that we will also go all out to the physicians, we will go to the next chunk of intervention cardiologists, but we said, no, let us not go to the physicians. Why? Because physicians still have brands which are 3 rupees and 4 rupees, and 12 rupees is still a premium for them. So that was a choice we made. And we focused very much on this level of second tier intervention cardiologists. We told them that we have not compromised on the quality. That's another very important decision that we took. We could have succumbed to the temptation of doing a local manufacture to save on our profitability, but we didn't do that because we realized that the trust and confidence and equity of Plavix was built around the fact of its quality by virtue of it being imported, from our parent company. So we didn't compromise on that. We continued to import it. It was a premium at a much lower price. So the quality was intact, and we gave a lot of confidence, to the end users, particularly the second choice of intervention cardiologists. And they picked up the product, and we had an ambition of increasing volume tenfold in 2 years, because we had a 90% dip, and to recover that baseline, we had to grow volume tenfold. So that was the equation that was needed. We gave our team the challenge of doing it in 2 years, and we did it in 1.5 years.
Wow,
So,
wonderful.
yeah, so the first learning that I got is that don't be overawed by your challenges, but take some time and have the patience to find opportunities and make these opportunities address your challenges. That's uh,
Absolutely.
that's point number one, which is very, very important.
Right.
The second thing is, Shailesh, in marketing, whatever you do, you've got to measure what you do. See, today, every marketer faces a classical dilemma. Out of 100 rupees that you spend, you don't know which part of the money is actually giving you the traction and which part is getting wasted. So you require some kind of a wisdom to understand what is working and what is not really working. So for that, you need to have your antennas open in terms of moving in the marketplace, getting some kind of a response from your doctors in terms of how do they perceive these things, and try to form your own judgment into what is really cutting ice or resonating with the doctors and what is not really resonating with them. It's a matter of judgment and experience that you have. There is no really hardcore formula that I can suggest where you know what part of your revenue is giving you the returns and what part of your revenue is going waste. But it requires a lot of your experience, it requires your judgment, it requires you moving in the market and having an interface with your customers. So whatever you do, whatever initiatives you embark on, measure it. Try to find out, how are the prescriptions tracking? Get to the specialties which you're targeting. Do you think you're having some kind of an impact at the level of these specialties in terms of the prescriber base, in terms of the prescriptions? So the concept of measuring what you do is absolutely very, very important. The third element is that one should not be looking inward. So rather than looking inside out, you should look outside in. Like if you go to the first part of our discussion, as I said, every marketer needs to understand the milieu in which your molecule or your products get used for different kind of patients. So what are the drivers that influence the treatment algorithms? Are doctors really following guideline based protocols? If not, you have an opportunity by way of education. Try to unearth customer preferences, why they are doing what they are doing, and what is it that is acting as a barrier for usage of your brands. So this was another big learning for me, that one has to be outside in rather than all the time being inside out. So you need to find that blend between being inside out and outside in. If you go on your set practices of what you've done in the past, maybe they would have been very successful, but you will replicate the same model. But if you have to think out of the box, if you have to grow disproportionately, if you have to really optimize the full scale of the opportunities and potential in the market, one has to be outward in rather than being inside out. So I
Brilliant.
think these are the important learnings that I have learned. I have made mistakes and I've learned from my mistakes, Shailesh.
No, no, but this is such a beautiful, candid conversation. I'm enjoying every second of this conversation because what you're saying is actually real nuggets of wisdom and gained wisdom through experience. And there is no better gained wisdom than through experience. I think, again, to summarize for the benefit of our viewers, I think some of the learnings that you so beautifully laid out is what? One, as you said, is challenge in any form of business, whether it's a price reduction or price control, whatever it is not to be seen only as an adversity, but also as an opportunity. And the price reduction actually gave you access to that 90% of the market automatically overnight because there was an affordability issue or a problem. Now, the government helped you address the accessibility issue by simply reducing the price. And now you could go down to those 5,500 odd interventional cardiologists, right? I think that was a clear case of seeing it differently, the other side of the glass, if I were to summarize with your kind permission, that you chose that as an opportunity. Because if you were to look at it as an adversity, marketers don't really then have any approach to solve that or fix it because that's an uncontrollable variable. I think the second beautiful point, which all of us as marketers have lived with, Anil, and I want to say is strategy, as you rightly said, is about making choices. Choices of what you will do, but also what you will not do. And I think what you have said so nicely is that is more important because everyone knows what he wants to do. But you ask guys as to what you don't want to do, it's all the more difficult. They are left scratching. So I think what you said, you don't want to go down to the cardio physicians down the pyramid because they were already used to writing very low priced clopidogrel generics, that you said, no, it doesn't make sense. But you went to the second tier of interventional, which still is a premium segment to play in, right? And that's something that is very beautiful. So that's the third take home for our viewers. The fourth take home, what you mentioned is, if you don't measure what you do, what's the point? then don't do it at all.
Correct.
There is no fun in doing marketing when you're not going to measure what you're doing. And I think outputs, measures in form of KPIs and metrics, as you were rightly alluding to, is extremely important. And this again talks about doing the ROI stuff. I think what you're really talking about is using analytics kind of approach, or at least having some semblance of understanding what part of your budget resourcing is actually giving you the results and not, so that you avoid wasteful expenditure. I think that's a very beautiful message that you've put, Anil. I think these 4 take-home points, and the last 5th take-home point is that understand what you talked about, the outside in approach, Anil, is what we talk to our clients as well, is the insights.
Correct. Absolutely.
Understanding.
You said it. Yeah.
The insight. Why does the physician behave in that fashion? What are his beliefs or attitudes or biases, as you said? And I find that when I also work with clients and in the industry, I see insights generation is obviously the first step of the marketing process or a brand building process. And I find it's a very weak or an underdeveloped area. I think you've touched it beautifully. I think your message is clear, Anil, that if you don't develop that insight generation capability, then I think not touched on the first step of the brand process. And that's so beautifully said. But this is great, Anil. Let's move on to the next piece, Anil, and that is the critical piece. Armed with such kind of a powerful combination of marketing, building brands, working in MNCs, working in Indian environments, you then come in as Associate Director for Sales and Marketing in Abbott Healthcare, right? Again came in with and you were back to the same old stable of Piramal through acquisition, but you were in a more senior leadership role driving both sales and marketing. And my question, Anil, is first thing, how was the culture integration is one, but more importantly, were there any differences in the brand planning processes of a European organization like Sanofi and an American organization? This is I would love to understand that. Yeah, are there fundamental differences, or the approach to brand planning is the same of what it was at a broad topic, contextual level? I don't need the second important thing is, how did you execute the mandate of building brands in the new Abbott Healthcare is something that we would want to know if you could spend some time.
Sure. So Shailesh, here again, it was very, very different. So coming to your first part on the cultural aspect of the experience, working in Sanofi and again working in Abbott. So while in Sanofi, predominantly the portfolio was original research brands. And you know these brands very well. You've been associated with Sanofi, and we are very proud. Every Sanofian today is very proud, worth their salt, who have built these brands into a very iconic stature that is occupying a place of pride, not just in the market, but in the clinical spectrum of doctors, be it a cardiologist, be it a neurologist, or be it a dermatologist. Brands like Clexane, brands like Targocid, Lantus, Allegra. These are very iconic brands in the industry today. And a lot of work has gone into building these brands to the stature what they are today. So predominantly the portfolio was an original research portfolio. Now come back to Abbott. Though, yes, it's an MNC, we do agree. The portfolio in Abbott is all a branded generic. And it was the Piramal acquired business, that was built to a different scale in the new Abbott environment with a very different way of operating and customer interface. So here we are in a completely branded generic space. No such thing as an original research molecule. So on one hand, you had iconic brands, which today are running into more than 150 crores, and some brands like Lantus have hit the glass ceiling of 500 crores. So we didn't have brands of this scale over here. So predominantly the portfolio in Abbott is the mid-sized brands. So there's a huge proportion of mid-sized brands and maybe a little bit of tail of small brands that is there in the portfolio. So it's all branded generics and mid-sized to small brands that were built. So these are very stark differences, say running from an MNC like Sanofi to coming to an MNC like Abbott. Now, when I look, the second part of the question that you said is about the entire process towards working on building brands. Well, the template is pretty similar in both these organizations. So the fundamentals that we talked about in terms of identification of the opportunities, the concept of the brand teams, and since we come with a certain past experience of what we have done in previous organizations, we tend to carry these practices in the new setup also where we come to, provided this is not being done in that new environment. But if it's already being done in some way, we tweak it up and we add some kind of a value in it and try to do, better than what is being currently done in that same setup. But if it is already being done, then it's better you don't fix if it's not broken. So I found that the template was broadly similar, the concepts, the entire approach towards building brands. So we talked about the brand team. So this entire concept of brand team was very much prevalent in both these organizations. And when we were closer to the campaigns, we involved our field guys also to get that connect of the customers and to see what is it that is resonating with the customers and how we can sharpen not only the messaging, but even the campaign by taking the inputs of the field. But the entire process, what we talked of, your decision-making process, why a doctor chooses to use a particular brand for different patient segments. So prioritization of your patient segments, looking at your patient funnel, assessing your leverage points, putting your resources behind the prioritized leverage points, focusing on one or two key levers of growth, which will give you that incremental revenue that you have set for yourself as a growth ambition, and then building the operational initiative and setting the KPIs. So I found that the process between my two organizations, which are MNCs, were largely very, very similar.
Very similar.
Though the environment was completely different. So one was predominantly into research brands, iconic stature, very large brands. Here we had mid-size, smaller brands, but a lot of challenge because let me tell you, it's a bloodbath in the branded generic space. And I would like to really, all those brand managers who handle branded generic, I would really like to pay my respects to each and every one of you. Because one thing that I realized moving from a research molecule based space into a branded generic space, it is much more difficult for a marketeer managing branded generics. Let me tell you that. A brand manager who handles research brand, I would say that 8 to 10% of the job is already done by virtue of it being an original research molecule. Because you earn the trust, you earn the confidence of the doctor, and that helps you to build further equity with on the ground good scientific initiatives. But the impetus is already generated by virtue of it being an original research brand. And we've seen that, once a doctor adopts these iconic brands, there's very less likelihood of the doctor stopping it, whatever be the provocation, unless it is not available, right? Or it goes out of stock. Otherwise, it stays on the pen of the doctor for long. But that's not the case in the branded generic space. So if you have got to build brands, if you have to ensure stickiness of your brand in the mind of your doctor, you've got to work differently. And differentiation is the mantra. Differentiation is nothing but finding that value proposition, which is a sweet spot between the need of the customer and what your offering is, so that it intersects beautifully and you do it better than what your competition does.
Right.
So for a branded generic person, it is much more difficult. But
Yes.
the key is you have to invest a lot of time in finding that sweet spot. Once
Yes.
you found that sweet spot, you will not be confined to practices that are short term, that are non sustainable, but you will be building practices that are sustainable and give you long term equity with your customers.
Right.
So I think the task for a marketer in branded generic space is far more difficult as
Right.
compared to an MNC. Not that an MNC brand manager is having a very cushy time. There's a challenge. I agree. There's a challenge in both, but the enormity of the challenge, the level of difficulty is much more because I've seen both the sides.
Yes.
So the
No,
enormity of the challenge is more in the branded generic space.
no, very beautifully summarized, Anil. I think it couldn't have come, from any better person than you because you've seen both sides of the coin, and this is, I think, a very powerful message for pharma brand managers who work in Indian organizations in a highly competitive, cutthroat branded generic space. What you have essentially said is brand building is possible. So you don't have to do trading or commoditization on your brand. That is the first thing you have said, and that is so much, reassuring to me as a brand coach, who coaches brand managers. It's really assuring because this is coming from you who's been there and done that. The second important point is you need to take time to identify that sweet spot, as you rightly said, because that is the value proposition and it takes time, but it is better to invest that time in finding that sweet spot because then you don't resort to the short term gimmicky stuff, the tactical stuff, the other which is not sustainable. You do programs which are meaningful long term, and as you rightly said, you elevate yourself in the eyes of the customer so that he sees you differently, and that's what you want to do. I think this is a very, very good solid messages for our brand manager audience of branded generic companies because that is the mantra for brand building, and it's so reassuring to hear that from you. Anil, now coming to your a phase where you now head the business. You are the chief business officer for a startup organization like Integrace Health. How has been the experience for the last 1.5 years? You have a much bigger mandate. I'm sure the pressures to deliver on stakeholder expectations, shareholder expectations, the management is high. But I'm sure you must be applying all your learnings of the cumulative experience into this role and helping the marketing teams inculcate processes and best practices. Could you help us know a little more as to what kind of a challenge or opportunities that you see in this new role in Integrace?
Yeah, so once again, it's back to getting into a startup circa 1996. After we started at that time, I was a very junior level. I was a product manager in Sanofi when we started operations. And here, yes, as you said, heading the entire business operations of a startup at Integrace is a very exciting experience for me. So basically, we are a very young organization, Integrace. We are just 2.5 years young in the Indian environment. And, in the words of Robert Frost, we've got miles and miles to go. But this journey of the last 2.5 years has been very, very encouraging. Yeah, last year we were in the midst of a pandemic, and we still are in the midst of pandemic. And we did take certain measures to stay afloat and to drive growth and to recover, the volume of business that we have lost. So that was one challenge that I really had to face, which I'd never anticipated once I joined Integrace. So I joined Integrace in the month of January, with a lot of enthusiasm to really set it up to the objective, what it had envisioned for itself in the next 5 years. And in 2 months' time, I'm realizing that, all the hard work that we put in terms of creating the plans for the annual plans, they had no relevance. And we had to completely re-engineer and change all our plans overnight. And I had not bargained for this scenario. So yeah, we have a enormous amount of responsibility that we carry. So our world of stakeholders is much larger than the conventional world of MNCs in which I have worked earlier. So today, our circle of influence even extends to our investors and our private equity partners. And yes, there is an expectation of driving growth because the investor would really look at getting returns for the investments and seeing how the company is shaping up, in terms of the key deliverables. So that is one mandate that I am responsible for in terms of ensuring that the plan is set, the template is set to take the organization to the next level. And it is broken down into a 5-year plan till 2025 and then going up to 2030, where our ambition is to be one of the top leaders in the Indian pharma market. So that is the ambition that we carry. And it's a step-by-step process driving disruptive growth. So what we think of is all the time disruptive growth, and how do we find ways and means to sustain the trajectory and build on the operations. Another thing that I think I'm quite proud of is that we think and act like a multinational. Though we are an Indian organization, we think and act like a multinational. So as I mentioned, the focus is always on value delivery to move beyond the short-term, tactical, non-sustainable stuff into delivering value to our customers. And in this short span of time, I think Integrace has carved an imprint in the mind of orthopedic or be it a physician into the kind of high level of science that we have driven, which helps the doctor and it helps us to partner with these doctors to understand their problems and to make sure that we partner with them to improve patient outcomes. So there are a number of very high level of initiatives that we work for. Like say, for example, in India, 70% of our population is took up this initiative of doing camps all over the country. So we did more than 1 lakh camps with more than 5 lakh of, sorry, not 1 lakh, 5,000 camps with more than 1 lakh patients. So 5,000 camps with more than 1 lakh patients. And this data has got published and it has proven to the fact that and this data Orthopedic Journal. So this message is going down and we are raising the threshold of sensitivity to doctors to detect patients who are either osteoporotic or osteopenic so that they give timely treatment and prevent future complications. Also, our focus is on creating very high level of scientific initiatives involving international societies. Carved an imprint in the mind of orthopedics as the go-to company for creating value on trauma. So we built a very strong perception in the space of trauma with our orthopedics. Gynecology is a new vertical that got added. So we are very active and looking for potential acquisition targets to add on to our business, to add on, to our revenues, to add on to our portfolio. So that adds in a lot of excitement to the role that I carry today, and coach and a different kind of an experience for me. Coming from a very large companies like Sanofi, which was in the top 17, 18th rank, and Abbott, which is obviously number 2 in India, into a company that is the youngest in the top 80 pharmaceutical companies in India today. So I'm very happy that in our journey, when we started, we were youngest in the top 100. And today we've reached somewhere as the youngest in the top 80. So that's the steps that Integrace has taken in the last 2.5 years.
Wonderful, wonderful to hear that, Anil. It's really amazing to hear that you are on a different ride right now. Driving a lot of other those excellence initiatives, but tying up with societies and with a new set of target audiences like orthopedicians and gynecologists, which is completely new for you, right? And you're doing some great stuff there. So marketing excellence can be built in any organization. What I hear loud and clear is you committed to the process of building marketing excellence, building brands the right way, understanding the milieu or the context in which these brands operate, and then you can still do a great job. I think that's wonderfully put by you. Let me come to the last part of our interview because we have another about 5 to 7 minutes to go. I want to pick your brains, Anil, on two very important issues related to marketing as a function. The first is COVID has taught us that nothing is permanent. And this 16 months has been probably the most disruptive for any company in the pharmaceutical industry. And the industry has had challenges in grappling with the COVID because you've had lack of face-to-face time, lack of access to customers. And overnight, everything ground to a halt in the phase 1 of the pandemic last year. And obviously this year also, it's been difficult times. But the opportunity that came through that adversity, to quote you, was that the industry had to move to a new realm called the digital transformation process. I know that you have been a passionate believer in the digital, transformation, whether it's through the accessing the customer through the channel, or doing digital initiatives, developing the kind of digital initiatives. So my question to you is, Anil, how do you see digital transformation in pharma? Is it going to be permanent because behaviors are changing? What's your take, whether it is interaction of the reps with the customers, whether it's the channel, whether it's the promotion? What's your take on the digital piece of marketing right now in our industry? And second piece, as a corollary to that question, which I'll again ask you later, is given this new dimension, post-COVID era, what we call it, do you believe that pharma brand managers need to adapt to this situation? Obviously, yes, but what new skill sets will they need if they have to ride this wave? That's my last part of the conversation.
Sure. I think, Shailesh, that's a very important question. And I'm so glad that you kept the best part of the piece for the last.
Okay.
So I think I did mention at some point of time during our conversation that the key is agility. Yeah, the environment has been most disruptive. So as you said, we very rightly pointed out that consumer behavior and consumer experiences have undergone a sea change. But to what extent have we understood or grappled with the magnitude of these changes? And how do we calibrate our responses and deliver actions in a very timely manner to address these challenges or look at them as an opportunity? I think that is where the key is for businesses or for marketeers to act on. So to answer your question, basically, there was a very interesting survey done by the BCG group, and they pointed out 4 fundamental pillars in which organizations can reinvent and re-engineer in the new norm. So the first was obviously digital engagement, as you referred to. Now, it's very easy to talk about digital engagement. That's become a buzzword today in the industry. But it's not just about digital engagement. Beyond digital engagement, what is it that will serve as an X factor or a motivator for a customer, be it a doctor or be it a patient, to get hooked onto your digital platform? It's very easy to serve digital plethora of digital initiatives on a platter, but how many takers are really there for it? So the takers will really depend on the extent of the value that you generate for your digital initiatives. So this survey from the Boston Consulting Group threw up some very interesting aspects. So one thing that was very well appreciated by these doctors was this entire concept of webinar. So during the lockdown and restricted hours of practice, yes, they got more time to update themselves. And when you have meaningful content coming from international experts or large scale, large body of national experts, and if you are able to address the need of these doctors and add on to their knowledge levels through case studies and giving them, nuggets from top opinion leaders, is what really connects better to them and resonates with them. So what they said, that is this entire concept of interface with the experts, getting that one-on-one interaction and addressing their queries and being more customized to address their clinical challenges with the top-notch experts is something that they appreciated. The experts obviously appreciated the peer group discussions and adding on to the repertoire of the knowledge by learning from each other. The journal subscriptions online was something which was very well appreciated as per the response from this survey. And the other thing that came out very strongly was certification courses, or accreditation from international and national bodies. So if marketeers can really integrate their digital initiatives, keeping in mind the interest or the knowledge needs of the doctors and satisfying those knowledge needs in a very, very innovative way with differentiated content, building accretive value, I think you have a good chance to succeed in the space. And this is not what I'm saying, but it's the survey from the BCG which is clearly pointing to this fact. But marketers should really try to dig deep and understand the definition of value to the customers, and therefore, dish out the initiatives which will really connect to the need and deliver value to these customers. So that was the first point or the first pillar that came out. The second thing was the entire problem of customer interface. And Shailesh, I've heard your videos as well. And you also have brought up these challenges that today we have lost face time with the customers. Absolutely. So what did Pharma try to do? So one thing which many companies tried was these video calls. But let me tell you, these video calls did not cut ice with the doctors. Some doctors were very decent enough to listen to the rep, but then they said that there was very poor communication skills and the video call or the quality of content really fell apart. So that is something that we as marketers and we as industry leaders really need to think about. Doctors are giving us a message. They're giving us a message by saying that, hold on, guys, your people are not well trained. You first train your people well, build up their confidence level and expertise with that kind of a knowledge to connect to us and talk about different areas of therapies and how they connect to the patient. That is what doctors are looking for. So beyond the video calls, I think one thing that worked very well was this entire area of push messaging. Now, what do I mean by push messaging? Push messaging can be in the area of just capsulated information specific to different therapies that companies operate in. So any large company today, they have grown to that size by virtue of improving their therapeutic presence. So companies operate in multiple therapies. Now, operating in multiple therapies, it is important for organizations to dig deeper into the clinical data and get good contemporary information that can add on to the knowledge levels. Can you build models around case studies which doctors can connect and identify with the need of the patients and the challenges that they see with different type of patients in clinical practice? You're giving them customized content delivered and catered to their needs. When you're able to do that and you're able to push message notification to your doctors, there's a better chance that the doctor will not delete your messages, right? Otherwise, what happens is it just goes into the delete bin. So very important. Another way in which you can add value is to the entire area of push message notification. The third thing is the way we are doing, a Zoom call. So many companies have done this, and doctors have been very decent enough to give the call because of the relationship with the company, because of the relationship with the reps. So there are reps, who have these iPads and they use the content on the iPads to connect to the doctors. So here also, yeah, it is working and it is fairly encouraging. But if you got to take it to the next level, what I would suggest is don't leave the job to the rep to do it. This is an era in which you've got to consume the doctor's interest and attention to your digital content. Content is the king today. So why leave it only to the rep and the first line or second line manager? Can the brand manager be there during the course of the conversation? Can somebody from the medical team be there? You stream some very important content and talk about the clinical implications of that content and check with the doctor on what their opinion is regarding the message that is being streamed over there and how relevant it is to their practice and what do they think are the advantages and the shortcomings. You're involving the doctor in a dialogue. It's not a monologue. and you're delivering content where there is a value in that content with experts being involved in terms of streaming that message to the doctor. So this is another area that we as an organization or we as an industry really need to look to in terms of how to use this adversity, in Shailesh's words, as a challenge, to reach out to your customers better and ensure better stickiness for what you have to offer to them. The third area which this BCG group had mentioned was in the area of patient centricity. Now, today we realize that there's a growing influence of telemedicine and e-pharmacy. So the patient behavior also has undergone a sea change. The entire consumer experience has undergone a change. So how do organizations work on a patient-centric approach within the regulatory framework of operations, knowing what is not to be done and what is to be done? So there are different examples over here. So when we talk of patient centricity, it can be for an existing patient who's in the chronic care space, or it can be for a new patient. So when I look at new patients, right, the experience that comes to my mind is the entire work that was done around Thyronorm. So if you look at Thyronorm, where it was 10 years back and where it is today, the brand has traveled by miles. Now, this has not happened by serendipity, right? There's been very conscious 360 degrees approach that has been integrated into the entire aspect of planning and marketing of this particular brand. So first thing what you do is you raise the sensitivity in terms of identifying those patients who are at risk of hypothyroidism. So you build patient profiles and you educate the doctor that if you see these kind of profiles, then you have to bear in mind that these patients could be at risk of hypothyroidism. The second thing is that you extend your tie-up beyond the doctor to path labs, encourage tests to be done because these are all silent diseases and they are not manifest through symptoms. So once you detect, you get a chance to address the patient funnel of detection and treatment and moving on to your class share and to your brand share. So I think this was a very classic 360-degree game, which we can learn from a brand like Thyronorm. Another very interesting example is Cipla's Berok Zindagi campaign. So it is not for anything today that Cipla is a market leader in the respiratory space. And if you look at the entire work that they have done in Berok Zindagi, that gives a lot of inspiration to marketeers that you can leverage the power of patient centricity to make your brand associate not just with the patient, but also with the doctor. So they gave a lot of confidence to the patient. There is a stigma attached to the use of inhalers or to an asthmatic, but Berok Zindagi tried to address that beautifully. They said that, this is a problem that you can manage, and we are there to give you value so that you are able to manage your condition better with the advice of your doctor. So they gave a lot of confidence and motivation to the patients to manage their condition with the help of their state-of-the-art technology. So that is another important patient-centric campaign that comes to my mind when you're trying to establish a new category for a new patient. And then you have this entire patient centricity, which is done in the chronic care space, which is very well known. So a lot of companies which are in the diabetic therapy area or in the cardiology therapy area, they've been doing a lot of work in terms of counselors being attached to doctors and clinicians. Now, today, that entire experience has traveled digitally. So, it's an entire 360-degree digital approach that is there on the digital media. So you have a doctor online, you have a counselor online, and the patient gets constant notifications at particular points in time in terms of, managing their conditions and taking the desired treatments, also managing their therapeutic regimen, what the doctor has advised for them, also different lifestyle approaches. So if there is any miss, the patient gets a notification that this is what you should have done, but yeah, you have missed it and this is what you need to do. So you're taking your patient-centric approach to a completely different level, and you can do that very easily by unleashing the transformative potential of digital. So digital gives you the leverage and the bandwidth to build very strong, sustainable patient-centric models. And I think this adversity can be converted into an opportunity of connecting to your stakeholders in a very integrated fashion through digital technology, be it a doctor, be it a pharmacist, or be it a patient, or be it an insurance provider. So all these can be, or a counselor, all these can be beautifully linked in your digital channel through a 360-degree approach, and you can differentiate yourselves better from mass. And the fourth area was entirely in the space of commercial operations. How commercial operations is going to change in the new norm. First thing what we've learned is, we did not do physical meetings. We can do meetings virtually. So my sense is that even once the situation normalizes, a large part of our meetings and reviews would move, into the digital space, into the virtual space. So you get that feeling of connecting one to one. You can address all that you had to address through a review or through a cycle meeting, and you can fulfill that entire purpose digitally. So digital is going to change the landscape in which pharma does its typical business and runs its processes. Second thing, I think in terms of commercial operations, there has to be a champion, who will be leading digital savviness in the organization. And this digital savviness medium in the organization must work very closely with marketing and with medical in terms of addressing the needs of the customers and building value, as I had mentioned. So organization has to invest in a center of excellence that will drive digital savviness through the organization. And of course, you need to build in big data and data analytics. And when you churn out all this data, you will understand, and this is again, the BCG data has clearly shown that there are 70% of doctors who are non-productive, and it is 30% of the doctors who drive your business. So organizations can look at how they can synergize between sales lines, how they can optimize, how they can improve efficiency of sales effectiveness and business operations by integrating big data and data analytics into the entire process of planning and execution. So I think the future of work, as you call it, is going to traverse to these four areas that I had mentioned, in terms of digital engagement, in terms of patient centricity, the sales call model, and the commercial operations model. And that is where the future of work lies for in the healthcare space. And thanks, Shailesh, you have really raised a very, very important point. And it is important that marketeers carry this mandate forward. You should have that agility to think fast and act fast and deliver value to your customers. So this cannot succeed without delivering value. To make it stick, you need to have that value proposition, which is what I'm saying time and again. If you do what you do without a value proposition, it's not going to sustain. It's going to fall flat sooner than you think. And then you wonder what hits you. So think through what your value proposition is and find that sweet spot in all your digital engagements. So good luck, to all our marketeers and business leaders in bringing about digital change in our industry today and making pharma and healthcare one of the top notchers in the digital space and in the technology space. And I always believe, Shailesh, that by now we are not in pharma industry per se. It is incidental. We are a technology-driven company that is into healthcare. That is the way people have to rethink. We are no more a healthcare organization, but we are a technology company into healthcare space. And I think if you change your mindset into this level of thinking, you will be able to integrate the power of digital much faster and much better in your business sphere.
Absolutely. I mean, I have heard you spellbound with complete rapt attention, Anil. I think you have given such powerful messages on the story of digital transformation and the need for us to up our game as pharma marketeers. And you put it so beautifully that we are not anymore a pharmaceutical industry, in a cocoon, but the ecosystem has changed. It is completely different today, and it's changed because it was forced to change 16, 17 months ago. Today we are seeing intersection of technology and health like never before. Today we are seeing disruption in the pharma business model, which I have been passionately saying this for the last 4 years, to my clients, like never before. We have seen disruption not only in all parts of the patient journey and more so in the digital patient journey, as you rightly put. And what better affirmation of this disruption when today you got up to hearing the news that Pharmacy acquired Thyrocare for an astounding sum of money, which clearly shows where the landscape is headed, Anil. I mean, if this is the level of play that we're going to have, of tech and health intersections, I think the opportunities are immense. Thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful, open-hearted discussion. I think there is a lot that you have put on the table for our marketeers to learn and imbibe as we go forward in our journey towards marketing excellence. And once again, Anil, a heartfelt thank you to you because I've known you for over 2 decades. You've been completely passionate and devoted to the goal of marketing excellence. And I could not have afforded a situation not to have you. It was a must to have you on our platform to have you share your thoughts around certain issues of marketing and brand building. So thanks a lot, Anil. And if you have any last closing points to mention for our next couple of minutes, as we totally run out of time, but it's nevertheless, I think people will benefit. So over to you for the last.
Thank you very much, Shailesh. I'm really humbled, and it's a great pleasure always to have that association with you. A few take-home points. The first thing is find a value proposition for whatever you do. to make your initiative stick and to increase stickiness. Secondly, is that don't do things in isolation, be insight driven, as Shailesh had mentioned. Get your insights on the table, test them out, validate them, and then work on your insights. Third is look at the patient journey, find your leverage point, and through that leverage point, find your sweet spot in how it can intersect beautifully between your capability and the need of the customer and do it better than what your competition does. And fourth, measure what you do so that you know what is working and how effective you are in terms of what you're doing and where you need to bring in the course correction. Because there are things that will work, there are things that will not work. So you should know where you're ineffective and dissipate that thing which is dissipating your resources. You need to address that and be more effective for what money you put and get a better bang for the buck. So thank you all very much. Shailesh, always a great honor to be interacting with you. There's so much that one learns by just listening to you. And you always bring that value in every interaction, in every conversation. I've enjoyed every of my interaction with you. Thank you so much.
Same here, Anil. Same
and
here.
Thanks to all our viewers.
Yeah, thanks, Anil. Equally reciprocated. A fabulous conversation with you, and a true business leader like you have seen it, been there, and done that. Thanks a lot once again. A heartfelt thanks. We shall stay safe, and we'll be in touch. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Stay safe. Good luck, and all the very best.
All the very best. Thank you so much, Anil. Bye bye.
Bye.